All right, well, welcome to the lecture on the tragic heroism of the Light Brigade. Today we're going to dive into one of the most famous war poems ever written, Alfred Lord Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade. But before we even read the first line, let's look at Richard Catton Woodville Jr.'s painting, The Charge of the Light Brigade, from 1894. Take a moment to look at it. Notice that in the foreground you have a cavalry officer who lies wounded on the ground. His horse is crashing forward, which emphasizes the brutality of war. Behind him, British cavalrymen continue charging with their sabers drawn, despite falling comrades and explosions. The background is filled with cannon fire, smoke, and enemy forces, all capturing the chaos of the battle. Now ask yourself, do these men look like heroes or victims? Does this image make war look glorious, or does it emphasize its horror? Does duty matter more than survival? Tennyson's poem explores these same questions, the tension between valor and futility, duty and disaster. Now let's take the poem apart line by line. First, some historical context, the Crimean War and the fatal blunder. The Charge of the Light Brigade took place on October 25, 1854, during the Battle of Balaclava in the Crimean War. Due to a miscommunication, the British cavalry charged straight into heavily armed Russian artillery, a suicidal assault. Over 600 men rode in, and fewer than half survived. A newspaper report from the Times used the phrase, "Someone had blundered," which Tennyson incorporated into his poem. Literary critic John Ruskin from 1865 argued that the poem immortalizes the nobility of self-sacrifice, showing how soldiers obey orders despite knowing they're doomed. Should soldiers always follow orders, even when they're disastrous? Let's take a look at the poem. How is it structured? It's 6 stanzas mirroring the 600 cavalrymen. It's written in dactylic meter, and it has a galloping rhythm which mimics the sound of horses charging. It has an irregular rhyme scheme which reinforces the chaos of the battle. So why does this matter? The fast-paced rhythm immerses us in the charge, and the abrupt line breaks mirror the unpredictability of war. Let's read the poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the Light Brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. There's not to make reply, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered. Stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well. Into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell, rode the 600. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke. Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered, then they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell, all that was left of them, left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade. Noble 600. Okay, taking a look at lines 1 through 6, here Tennyson employs repetition, metaphor, and the use of dialogue. Under repetition, he uses the line half a league, half a league, half a league onward. This mimics the rhythm of the galloping horses. He uses a metaphor, valley of death, which is a biblical reference from Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil. This symbolizes impending doom. And he uses dialogue. Forward, the Light Brigade. This captures the immediacy of the battle orders. The fallen soldier in the foreground, looking back at Woodville's painting, does he represent the inevitability of death in this quote-unquote valley? And the cavalrymen charging forward, are they brave or are they doomed? Literary critic and poet T.S. Eliot believed that the poem captures the beauty and horror of war simultaneously, showing both the courage of the soldiers and the senselessness of their sacrifice. But what do you think? Does this poem celebrate war, or does it expose its tragic cost? Looking on to the next part, lines 7 through 12, Tennyson employs a rhetorical question. He uses refrain and he uses euphemism. So when he asks that question, was there a man dismayed, he's emphasizing blind obedience. And then he uses the refrain, there's not to reason why, there's but to do and die. This is repeated later, which reinforces duty over thought. Don't think about it, just do it. And then he uses euphemism, which is do and die. This softens the reality of mass death. Literary critic A.C. Bradley saw this stanza as a critique of Victorian values in general, glorifying duty above all else, even when it leads to disaster. Just progress, 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 just for the sake of progress. Science over faith, science over religion. That's what was the attitude during the Victorian period. Looking again back at Woodville's painting, you notice the fallen soldier didn't reason why. He obeyed, and now he's dead. Does he look noble, or does he look like a casualty of blind obedience? Ask yourself again, should we admire their sacrifice or question the decision that led to it? So, moving on to the next few lines, 13 through 18. Tennyson uses poetic devices, anaphora, imagery, and alliteration. When he says cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, this creates a sense of entrapment. These soldiers are encased, they're imprisoned by an impending death. He uses imagery, stormed at with shot and shell. This vividly conveys the relentless gunfire. And he uses alliteration, volleyed and thundered, which mimics the sound of cannon fire. Literary critic and poet Wilfred Owen, from 1917, he was also a poet of the World War I era. He rejected war-glorifying poetry, but he did admit that Tennyson's depiction of bravery was masterful. Look at the painting again. The smoke and fire surrounding the soldiers. Can we even see their individual faces? Are they men, or are they just part of a larger war machine? Ask yourself, does this scene glorify war, or does it expose its brutality? Moving on to lines 19 through 26. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered. Plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian reeled from the saber stroke, shattered and sundered. Here, Tennyson is using several poetic techniques and devices. He uses repetition, alliteration, enjambment, and very vivid imagery. Under repetition, when he says flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air, the word flashed creates a rapid visual rhythm, mimicking the speed of the attack. With alliteration, sabering the gunners, the sharp S sounds mimic the slicing of sabers through the air. Use of enjambment, where the lines rush forward without pause, that creates a sense of momentum and chaos. It's the rushing of the soldiers, the rushing of the horses into battle. Imagery is plunged in the battery smoke. This is the fog of war, which obscures everything, emphasizing disorientation and the chaos of battle. This moment is the closest thing to victory the Light Brigade experiences. Despite the horrible blunder, they manage to break through enemy lines, but at an impossibly high cost. The phrase, all the world wondered, is key because Tennyson leaves it ambiguous. Did the world admire them, or did they question the stupidity of the charge? Looking back at Woodville's painting again, the cavalry are slashing through enemy lines, but they're vastly outnumbered, just like in this moment in the poem. The billowing smoke in the background mirrors Tennyson's quote-unquote battery smoke, which blinds the soldiers as they charge ahead. Again, ask yourself, does this moment glorify battle, or does it make us feel the reckless waste of life? Critic John Ruskin wrote that these lines capture the beautiful, terrible grandeur of battle. They make us feel awe and horror at the same time. Moving on to lines 27 through 30, then they rode back, but not the 600. Here Tennyson is using repetition and an abrupt shift in tone. Not the 600 is a staggered rhythm which creates a sudden sharp realization that many did not return. The abrupt shift in tone, up until now the poem has been fast and galloping, but here it pauses for us to absorb the death toll. This is the moment of reckoning. They have survived the charge forward, but now they must retreat through the same fire. There are no heroic words here, no grand victory, just loss. Looking back at Woodville's painting again, the fallen cavalrymen on the ground are the ones who did not return, a visual reminder of the real cost of war. T.S. Eliot called this moment the most devastating pause in English war poetry, where Tennyson forces us to stop and acknowledge the cost. Ask yourself, did these soldiers die for a noble cause, or were they sacrificed in a mistake? Moving on to lines 31 through 38, Tennyson uses anaphora, personification, and alliteration. In the lines, cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, the repetition traps them just like before. This is anaphora. The personification, jaws of death and mouth of hell. The battle is no longer just a place. It has become a living, monstrous force consuming these men. And again, the use of alliteration, the horse and hero fell, the repetition of H sounds emphasizes their heroic sacrifice. Hellish imagery is important here because Tennyson compares war itself to a kind of damnation. The only thing left to do is survive, but even that's not guaranteed. Look back at the painting. Notice the exhaustion and desperation in the retreating figures' faces. They're not victorious, they're merely escaping. Again, Wilfred Owen says that this is one of the first poems to depict the war, the horror of war, without fully condemning it. Ask yourself, does this poem glorify war or expose its horrors? In lines 39 through 44, all that was left of them left of 600. Tennyson uses the repetition of that word left to emphasize the loss and incompleteness of the survivors. There's an abrupt brevity. This line is short and final, just like the lives of the men in battle. Their lives were cut short. There's no victory parade, no celebration, just the acknowledgement that some survived, but not all. The language is stripped down, no grand gestures, just an accounting of what remains. If so many were lost, was it worth it? Elaine Showalter argues that Tennyson uses silence here as much as language. The gaps in the poem force us to feel the weight of death. So, looking at the last stanza, when can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made. All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made. Honor the Light Brigade, noble 600. Here Tennyson uses repetition and ambiguity. When he says honor the charge, he's talking about reinforcing the respect for their bravery. When he's using ambiguity, all the world wondered, he leaves the reader thinking, did the world admire them or question their decision? Literary critic Elaine Showalter pointed out that Tennyson avoids outright blame, honoring the soldiers, but leaves room for readers to question the generals. You need to ask yourself, is their glory real, or is it a way to justify senseless loss? Would you have charged knowing it was a mistake? So, ultimately, what do we learn from the charge of the Light Brigade? This poem forces us to confront the duality of war, honor and horror, duty and disaster, bravery and blindness. What do you think?